Hey, what's up, guys? This is Benny Ricciardi with RotoCurve.com, and I'm here with our DraftKings, FanDuel, MLB, Benny's Bats edition for Tuesday, June 14th. It's a pretty big 14-game slate on tap for tonight. There is a game in the afternoon if you want to play the all-day slate. It's 15 games total, one game in the afternoon, the other 14 being tonight. So those are the games we're going to concentrate on. As always, what we like to do here in the Benny's Bats section, we talk about every pitcher that's on the mound, try to figure out what their weakness is, and then figure out which bats on the other team profile to do the best against them. So let's start right at the top with the Chicago Cubs against the Washington Nationals today. Got John Locke on the mound for the Cubs, and I don't really have anything bad to say about him. I mean, left-handed bats are only hitting .214 against them this year, although their average is normally higher than that in years past. And right-handed bats are only hitting 195. So, I mean, Lackey's been about as lights out as anybody that we have here. You know, you look over at that Washington team, and there's only a couple guys that hit right-handed pitching well. You got Bryce Harper, and my problem with Harper is, if you remember back to the last series that Chicago and Washington played, they basically walked Bryce Harper every single time he was up, except for maybe 2 at-bats, I think, where they had to pitch to him. I think they're probably going to try to do that again, or at the very least, they're going to stay away from him. They may not intentionally walk him, but they may intentionally try not to throw him any strikes and get him to swing out of the strike zone, or, you know, not worry if they do actually wind up putting him on. If that's going to be the case, then the guy who we should be looking at is probably Daniel Murphy. Now, Murphy has cooled off a little bit. His average is down from the 390s all the way down to, I think it's below 370 now, like 368, 369. I mean, that's still a very good batting average. I'm not saying that he's, you know, a horrible player or anything, but he's definitely not as hot as he was earlier in the year. He does have a 378 WOBA, does have a 221 ISO score against right-handed pitching. So Harper and Murphy are definitely my 2 favorite bats. If you're looking for another left-hander to throw in there against Lackey, Ben Revere leading off for them is another interesting guy. You know, I really don't see a ton of upside with Revere. And like I said, if all they're going to do is walk Harper, you know, he might be a decent cash game option because, you know, 3 walks or, you know, 2 walks and a hit get you 10, you know, maybe 8 to 10 points. But I just don't see big upside as long as teams aren't pitching to him. The only guy that really kind of stands out to me as somebody who I would probably want is Daniel Murphy. And it depends what site you're playing on because his price is still pretty high all over the industry. On the other side of this game, we got the lefty Gio Gonzalez on the mound. You know, right-handed bats have always had a higher average against him. He's always been very tough on left-handed bats. The problem that he's had this year is his home run rate is a lot higher than it has been. You know, he's usually a guy that didn't give up a lot of home runs, but this year, right-handed bats especially have been tagging him for a couple long balls. I think it's a tough matchup for him because we know how good this Cubs team is. I know they got shut down yesterday, but, you know, Gio Gonzalez is not Max Scherzer. I think you can look at guys like Dexter Fowler, who's 8 of 17 lifetime against them. You know, a guy like Chris Bryant, 2 of 5 lifetime with a home run. You know, Ben Zobrist, you know, Javi Baez, I think is a very sneaky play. All these guys have 360-plus WOBAs. You know, Bryant and Baez are the 2 guys that also have some power. They got the high ISO scores in the, you know, 220, 240, 260 range. So those are the guys that I'd be looking to attack Gio with. Next game we can talk about, we got Baltimore at Boston. We got David Price on the mound for the Red Sox. Now, right-handed bats have a higher average against them, but it's only about like a 240 average, so it's not like they're killing them. You know, left-handed bats do not touch them. They don't do very well at all against them. You know, right-handers do have a few more home runs. Baltimore is not great versus left-handed pitching, but they do have a couple guys with some home run power that I think we got to look at. Mark Trumbo, obviously the one that pops off the page. 356 WOBA, which isn't spectacular, but it's good. 278 ISO score is really the thing that kind of gets me, though. He's 8 of 22 lifetime against Price with 2 home runs, and Trumbo has big power, especially against left-handed pitching. You know, you can look at guys like Adam Jones, who hits lefties well. You know, Manny Machado has actually been better in righty-on-righty situations, but he's a pretty solid, pretty solid option to look at, too. You know, maybe even Chris Davis, even though it's lefty-on-lefty, because he does have some power. You know, like I said, none of these guys really have great BVP against Price. I don't think it's an easy matchup here for Baltimore, but I do think that you get maybe 1 or 2 home runs from these guys. You know, Price can make a mistake, and there are some big bats on this Baltimore team that can go yard. On the other side of the game, we got Chris Tillman on the mound, and Tillman's actually been really good in 2016. 220 batting average allowed to both right and left-handed bats. he does have a high fly ball rate, and right-handers do actually hit more home runs against him. So maybe a guy like Mookie Betts leading off is in a pretty good spot. 360 WOBA, 206 ISO. We saw him go on a little bit of a power surge earlier in the year. I really like this kid. He's got a great bat. Definitely somebody that I would look at and somebody that I would consider. You got guys like Dustin Pedroia, 357 WOBA, 155 ISO, another right-handed bat. And then even the lefties against the righty Tillman. You got David Ortiz, 435 WOBA, 344 ISO, 377 WOBA, 277 ISO. So, all these guys at the top of that Boston order right there, I think are all going to be in play here today. Next game we can look at, we got Cincinnati against Atlanta. In this game, Julio Teheran, he's been great lately. Normally left-handed bats are the way you want to attack them, but the last couple games he's been good against lefties, against righties. He's been limiting hits, been limiting runs, not giving up a ton of home runs, which has usually been his problem. The last 2 games actually, the home run problem started to reappear. I think he gave up 4 home runs in his last 2 games, and that's a little bit of an issue for him. They do have a lot of power on the Cincinnati team. You got guys like Joey Votto, 405 WOBA, 235 ISO. He can take him yard. Jay Bruce, only a 332 WOBA, but a 254 ISO score. So he's another guy that can definitely go and, hit one out of the ballpark. You got Adam Duvall, who's basically just a home run hitter. I mean, this guy has been mashing it lately. Righty on righty, so not exactly the matchup we're looking for here, but his power plays in any matchup. So he's another guy that I think can take him yard. So there are a couple guys here who could tag Teheran. He really has to be careful not to give up the walks, which had been a problem for him last season. And again, left-handed bats hit over 300 against him last year. He's been much better against lefties this year, but, he does actually have a little bit of, struggles against lefties over his career, and he does have a little bit of a struggle with the long ball. So some of these left-handed power bats like Votto and Bruce in the middle of the order are kind of interesting to me. On the other side of this game, we got Brandon Finnegan. Left-handed pitcher, right-handed bats have a high home run percentage against them and a good batting average. The problem I have here is Atlanta has been horrendous against lefties. So you have a bad lefty going up against a team that's bad at hitting lefties. So, it's kind of like the old, the unstoppable force and the immovable object argument. Is Atlanta worse against lefties than a guy like Finnegan is? I don't really know. I'm not sure how this one, kind of breaks itself out. But nobody on this team has over a 333 WOBA against left-handed pitching. Nobody on this team has over a 171 ISO score against left-handed pitching since the start of last season. So really, when you're looking at it, there's nothing that stands out. I mean, this team is historically bad against left-handed pitching this season. So if you want to go against Finnegan because he's a gas can, which he is, and I'm not arguing against that, I understand the reasoning. I just can't give you any guys that legitimately stand out because there are no guys that legitimately stand out on this Atlanta team against left-handed pitchers. The next game to talk about, we got Pittsburgh against the New York Mets. Juan Nicasio on the mound for Pittsburgh. Nicasio has a couple problems that I don't really like. He struggles with too many walks, he struggles giving up too many home runs, and he struggles against left-handed bats. Now, the Mets lineup is pretty banged up right now. You take out Conforto, who's probably not going to play his day-to-day. You take out Lucas Duda, who's another big left-handed bat that they have. And normally I would be scared of a guy who struggles against left-handed bats against the Mets, but really you're only left with Curtis Granderson right here. 374 WOBA, 232 ISO for him up on top of the order. Like I said, he's the only big left-handed bat that they have left in that lineup. You still have Neil Walker, who's not a bad option. Alejandro Diaz has been getting more playing time with everybody banged up, so he's a solid option too. And then Yoenis Cespedes does hit well in righty-on-righty matchups. 377 WOBA, 267 ISO for him in those situations. So I guess he's another guy you can look at. But remember, Nicasio is kind of tough on right-handed batters. So, I wish I could tell you that the Mets are in a great spot to put up a ton of runs here, but I just kind of feel like this is going to be a lower scoring game. I do think the Mets get a couple runs off Nicasio, but I don't think they're going to have a game where they, you stack up the Mets and you win all the money today. On the other side of this game, I do like Jacob deGrom. He's been very good in his last 3 starts. In his last 3 starts, he's averaging 6 2/3 innings per game. He has a WHIP under 1, an ERA of 2.25, and 26 strikeouts in 20 innings. That actually includes a 6 innings pitch, 6 hit, 3 run, 9 strikeout performance against Pittsburgh in his last start. So, Josh has a theory, and he's been right on it and right on the money with it for most of the season long, where, when a team faces a pitcher twice in quick succession, they usually do better against him the second time. So Pittsburgh had an okay game against DeGrom last week. And I think with this being the second time they're seeing each other within a week, it could be a little bit better for this Pittsburgh offense. You look at this offense, I mean, Gregory Polanco is probably the guy who stands out the most big left-handed bat that's been hitting in the 3-hole for him. You know, his numbers aren't spectacular since the beginning of last season, 343, 163, but he's been a lot better in 2016. So I think he's somebody you can look at. You know, John Jaso at the top of that order there if you want to look at him. You know, guys like, Jung Ho Kong and Andrew McCutchen, Sterling Marte, all 360-plus WOBAs against right-handed pitching. So as much as I like Jacob deGrom, and I think he's a good pitcher and is in a pretty decent spot here today, you know, I don't think this is actually the softest matchup ever for him. So just keep that in mind when you're putting your teams together. I like him in tournaments. I still think he has a lot of upside, but at the same point in time, I don't think he's a slam dunk cash play like a lot of other people are calling him today. Next game we talk about, we got Seattle against Tampa Bay. Jake Odorizzi on the mound. Right-handed bats have a higher average against Odorizzi, and they hit more home runs. He's been very good this year at home. So he's at home here today. Only a 195 batting average against at home here. So he's been just absolutely phenomenal. 2.52 ERA at home. So, you know, I think he could be in line for a pretty solid start here. A couple of the guys that we can look at, you know, with him being kind of a reverse splits guy with righties having – you know, higher average and more power against them. I think Dae-Ho Lee is in play. I mean, it's still limited sample size for this guy, but been mashing the ball. 392 WOBA, 255 ISO in righty-on-righty matchups, so he's in play. Nelson Cruz, another guy, hits well in righty-on-righty matchups, 372 WOBA, 230 ISO, he's in play. And then Robinson Cano would be the other guy, even though he's a lefty. 377 ISO, 377 WOBA, 222 ISO against right-handed pitching. 2 of 8 lifetime against Odorizzi. You know, the three of them should be hitting in the 3, 4, 5 hole in the order. So I do like the middle of that Seattle order today. Although remember, Tampa Bay, not a very good hitter's park. On the other side of this game, we got Taijuan Walker. He has some extreme home road splits, which make me a little bit nervous about him. This guy is like lights out when he's at home in Seattle. But on the road, he's been getting tagged up. Right-handed bats hitting 313 against him this year with a whip of 1.59. Tampa Bay is not normally good in righty-on-righty matchups, but with Walker being a little bit of a reverse splits guy, it gives me a little bit of a pause here. You know, when I'm looking at the matchups, though, the only guy who kind of stands out even a little bit for me is Steve Pearce. Pearce has a 345 WOBA, 198 ISO in righty-on-righty matchups, and he has 3 of 5 lifetime already against Taijuan Walker. So, I mean, I hate to say it. I think there could be a little bit more out of this Tampa Bay offense, but the only guy that I'm comfortable – you know, kind of looking at the numbers and saying that he kind of fits here, it's probably Steve Pearce. But I mean, if Longoria and them all have big games, if you wanted to stack up Tampa Bay in a, you know, in a large field tournament, I don't think that's the worst move because I do think they'll be low owned. And like I said, you know, Walker has been struggling with the righties and he has been struggling away from home. So this could be one of those games where he just doesn't come out and dominate like we have seen him in a couple of his recent starts. Next game, we talk about Detroit at the Chicago White Sox. Jordan Zimmermann on the mound for Detroit. You know, normally left-handed bats are the way to go against them, but right-handed bats are hitting 280 against them this year as well. So you can look at, you know, like I said, it's a little bit of a reverse. Normally left-handed bats are hitting 280 and right-handed bats are hitting, you know, 220 or less. This year, he's been tough on lefties, and righties are the ones that are knocking him around. In righty-on-righty situations, I mean, Jose Abreu is the guy that stands out. Had a huge game yesterday. I know he had a home run. I think he had an RBI double to go with it. Had like 26 to 30 fantasy points. You know, just a monster day for him. 364 WOBA, 218 ISO score, 2 of 3 lifetime against Jordan Zimmermann already. So I do think Abreu is somebody who's going to be in play again. You can also look at Adam Eaton anytime he's going up against a righty. 350 WOBA, 163 ISO score. Another guy that makes a little bit of sense there. You know, the top of the order, if you get Anderson leading off again. I know he didn't do much yesterday, but this kid is a big prospect. You know, he looks good at the plate. He looks like he has a little bit of an idea. So if he's leading off again, you know, you're getting him cheap. But the shortstop position that's been tough to fill. You know, I think he could be another guy that we can look at. The other side of this game, we got Miguel Gonzalez on the mound, and I'm not a big fan of Miguel Gonzalez at all. Left-handed bats are higher average against them, but it's not like he's lights out the right-handed bats either. So you can look at guys from both sides of the plate, which is good because most of this Detroit order is right-handed bats. The 2 guys that stand out the most to me, Miguel Cabrera, 409 WOBA, 210 ISO score. JD Martinez, 366 WOBA, big 242 ISO score, so he's got the home run power. I guess if you're stacking them up, you can look at the guys like Kinsler and Castellanos as well. Be careful if you're using VMart. I know he wasn't in the lineup yesterday. I'm not sure if he's going to be playing today. But I do really like Miggy and JD as my guys that I would use as one-offs. And if you wanted to stack up the Detroit bats against Miguel Gonzalez, I'm not going to argue against you. I think Gonzalez is a little bit of a gas can. Next game, we can talk about Cleveland against KC. Josh Tomlin on the mound for Cleveland. Right-handed bats have a higher average against them. They have a higher fly ball rate, and they hit more home runs. So a guy like Lorenzo Cain, to me, is going to be in play. 6 hits and 18 at-bats against Tomlin. I don't think he's taken him yard yet, but like I said, Tomlin is somebody who has a high fly ball rate and does give up a decent amount of home runs. Games in KC, not an easy place to hit home runs out of, but I do like Cain, think he's in play. Hosmer hasn't been great against Tomlin in his lifetime. 5 of 25 lifetime with 2 home runs, but he does have a 391 WOBA and a 196 ISO against right-handed pitching. So he does make a little bit of sense, and you're not going to get any arguments out of me if you use Hosmer in tournaments today as well. The other side of this game, we got Chris Young on the mound, and Chris Young, left-handed bats have a higher average against him and a higher home run percentage. He's a fly ball pitcher, although playing in Kansas City, it kind of plays into his wheelhouse. Jason Kipnis is a guy that makes sense to me. 374 WOBA, 167 ISO, 7 of 17 lifetime with a home run against Young, so he's definitely in play. And then I think you can also look at the young kid, Tyler McQuinn, who they called up. 398 WOBA, 218 ISO for him in limited at-bats, left-handed bat going up against a right-handed pitcher. He's only had 1 at-bat against Chris Young. He's 1 for 1 with a home run, so obviously there was something that he saw with one of those pitches that he liked, and he does profile to be a guy that does well against Young, so I wouldn't mind using him as a flyer somewhere here or there, especially if he's cheap and where he's cheap around the industry. Next game, Houston at St. Louis. Doug Fister on the mound for Houston. Left-handed bats, always been the way to get after him. They have a higher average, an elevated fly ball rate against them. So I think a guy like Matt Carpenter definitely in a good spot here. 404 WOBA, 266 ISO. He's 1 of 6 lifetime with the home run against Fister, but again, he just profiles so well against them. If you give me 3 at-bats out of Carpenter against Fister today, I think he's going to get at least 1 or 2 hits and be able to put up a decent score. I also like Matt Adams and or Brandon Moss, depending on who's in there. Both of these guys have home run power. Adams is 2 for 6 lifetime against Fister with the homer. Moss is 4 for 7 lifetime with the homer and a couple other extra base hits. So both of these left-handers have hit him well. Any left-handers in the lineup for St. Louis today, I think at the very least deserve a look against Fister, who really struggles with left-handers at this point in his career. On the other side of the mound, we got Jaime Garcia. Left-handed bats, he's kind of a reverse splits lefty, which is a very rare thing. He is a very solid pitcher right now. I think he's got a good matchup here, especially with Correa out. Going up against a Houston team that's kind of struggling a little bit and does have a high strikeout rate. Garcia is not known as a quote-unquote strikeout pitcher, but against a team like Houston, I still think he can get you, a strikeout per inning, maybe even more because of the free swing nature here. The only 2 guys that worry me a little bit, Jose Altuve, 426 WOBA, 185 ISO, has hit left-handed pitching well his entire career, is 6 of 13 against Jaime Garcia, so he's hit Garcia well his entire career. I think, Altuve is somebody that if you can afford him, makes a lot of sense to try to fit into your lineups today. The other guy is George Springer, 406 WOBA, 232 ISO for him. I don't have any BVP history for him against Garcia, but again, he is somebody that hits left-handed pitching pretty well. So I do think we got to, at the very least, respect what he can do for us. Next game we're going to talk about, we got Minnesota at the LA Angels. Jhoulys Chacin. He's had basically 1 good start this year against Detroit. I think he went 9 innings of like a 1 or 2 hitter. Every other start, though, has been like, single digits or maybe like 10 DraftKings points. So nothing with a lot of upside here. Left-handed bats are the way you want to attack them, but right-handed bats are okay too. This Minnesota team doesn't really have a lot that you can go after him with. The only guy who has decent numbers is Eduardo Nunez, 352 WOBA, 128 ISO. Other than that, there really isn't a lot here. I mean, if you want to use guys like Dozier or Plouffe or Mauer, feel free, go ahead. I feel like all these guys are a little bit, past their prime. And really, if you look at it just based on the numbers, there's like nobody on this Minnesota team that really profiles well against Chacin. On the other side of the game, we got Ervin Santana pitching. Left-handed bats have a higher average against him. Excuse me. Elevated fly ball rate, elevated home run rate. The lineup that he's going up against is pretty weak. The only guy that I'm really considering is Mike Trout. Remember, Trout did leave the game 2 days ago with a little bit of a banged up, bruise. I don't feel like it's something that's going to linger. I think he's okay. 414 WOBA, 285 ISO score. But again, I would just make sure that you hear that, there's nothing that's affecting his swing or anything like that before you go ahead and spend up on him. Next game we can talk about, we got we should see some runs out of this game because two pretty bad pitchers on the mound. Martin Perez is going for Texas. Right-handed bats have a high average against him. He is more of a ground ball pitcher, though, so it's not a guy that I'm expecting to see a lot of home runs get hit against by this Oakland team. But you got guys like Danny Valencia, 399 WOBA, 228 ISO, 2-7 lifetime against Perez. Had a couple big hits yesterday with this Oakland team putting up some runs. You have Chris Davis with a K, 2-for-2 lifetime with the home run against Perez. Marcus Semien, 383 WOBA, 214 ISO score. He's been hot lately, hits left-handed pitching well. So those are the three guys that I really want to have some exposure to. If you are going to stack them up, maybe throw like a Coco Crisp in there or something, or a Lowry, depending on where they're batting in the lineup. And I do think that Perez is going to give up some runs. Oakland is not the greatest hitters ballpark, so I don't want to just jump and throw a whole bunch of bats into this game. But like I said, you got a bad pitcher on both sides of the mound here. The guy on the other side of the mound is Eric Surkamp, the lefty for Oakland. And he's just not a very good pitcher. So I think you can attack him. Right-handed bats are better, but lefties hit him as well. A guy like Jurickson Profar, who's actually been batting in the 3-hole lately with Adrian Beltre out. I think he's another guy we can look at. He's been hot, been getting a lot of hits for us, and is still pretty cheap. I think you can look at Ian Desmond, 365 WOBA, 199 ISO for him. Maybe even a guy like Ryan Rua, first base outfield eligible. 351 WOBA, 192 ISO. I really like the right-handed bats against Surkamp. But like I said, Surkamp is not a great pitcher, so I think you can use guys from both sides of the plate. Next game we're going to talk about, we got Miami against San Diego. Jus Pomeranz on the mound for San Diego. And this guy's one of my favorite young pitchers in the league. He's been great this year. He's been tough on both right and left-handed bats. He's been getting us some strikeouts. There aren't a lot of guys on Miami that profile well against them. Marcelo Zuna definitely is one of those guys. 426 WOBA, 237 ISO, has been mashing left-handed pitching this year. Definitely am a little bit afraid of him if I would be using Pomeranz today. The only other guy who kind of profiles well is Martin Prado, 364 WOBA, 122 ISO. Not a lot of power, not a guy that's going to jack out a double dong for you, but he's a very professional hitter. He could get on base and have some of these guys behind him knock him in. Now, Stanton has very good numbers against left-handed pitching his entire career as well, but, if you've been watching any baseball at all over the last couple of weeks, he still doesn't look right at the plate. He's not swinging the bat very well. I don't feel like he's a great play. So I am kind of shying away from him a little bit, but if you wanted to include him in there, especially if you're stacking it up, historically he does hit left-handed pitching well, although lately he has not been hitting well at all in any situation. Next guy we can look at is Tom Koehler. Left-handed bats do better against Koehler, but there really are no left-handed bats on the San Diego team. I mean, I guess the one exception would be Yangervis Solarte, who's probably going to be batting in the cleanup spot. He hits well from the left side against right-handed pitching, so I think he could be somebody in play. I mean, you got guys like Will Myers, who's been absolutely hot, and, Kemp and Norris and all those guys, but they're all right-handed bats. So the only other righty I think I'd take a little bit of a flyer on would probably be Will Myers, and only because this guy's been absolutely on fire lately. Next game we can talk about, we got Milwaukee at San Francisco. Matt Garza making his season debut here. Left-handed and right-handed bats both hit him hard in 2015. And I think San Francisco is going to be another one of those teams that hits him hard. He's going to be kind of rusty. Don't expect him to get to the 6th or even past the 6th inning today. So if you want to look at those lefties, guys like Span and Panic on top of the order, guys like Brandon Belt, guys like Jared Parker a little further on down, maybe Brandon Crawford, even a right-handed bat like Posey. I think there's a lot of guys that are in play here. Like I said, Garza had a horrible season last year. Hasn't pitched yet in the majors this year. He's making his debut in this game. And I know San Francisco's not the greatest hitter's park, but I also don't think Garza's going to have a very good start today. On the other side of this game, you got Madison Bumgarner. Bumgarner's been lights out to left-handed bats. So, luckily for Milwaukee, they don't throw a lot of left-handed bats out there, but I wouldn't be so shocked to see a guy like Scooter get a day off today and Neuenhuis get a day off, and anybody else they have who hits from the left side. Milwaukee does actually hit left-handed pitching decently. You got Jonathan Villar, 366 WOBA, 167 ISO, 1 of 2 lifetime with a home run off Bumgarner. Ryan Braun, 427 WOBA, 256 ISO, so those are some great numbers. He is also 8 of 26 with 2 home runs off Bumgarner lifetime. So those are the 2 guys that kind of stand out for me. If you're going to take guys on Milwaukee, just remember the game is in San Francisco, not in Miller Park. If it was in Miller Park, I think it would be different. I'd really like Villar and Braun. But with the game being in San Francisco and Bumgarner being a pretty good pitcher, I'm not really looking to go and take a lot of those guys. Next game we could talk about, New York Yankees at the Colorado Rockies. Nathan Eovaldi on the mound for the Yankees. Left-handed bats have a higher average and more home runs against them. So guys like Cargo and Blackman stand out. Cargo especially, 413 WOBA, 307 ISO since the start of last season. Those are just some absolutely sick numbers. Blackman, 358 WOBA, 184 ISO, so those numbers are good too. And then even in a righty-on-righty matchup, a guy like Nolan Arenado is a 385 WOBA, 309 ISO guy, so I think he's in play as well. You can look at a guy like Jorge De La Rosa on the other side. Right-handed bats kill him. Left-handed bats usually do okay against him. He's not lights out to lefties, but he is a lot tougher on them. So I think that means A-Rod is in a good spot here. 379 WOBA, 267 ISO since the start of last season. Has hit left-handed pitching well his entire career. Very good hitter's park there in Colorado. So I think he's in play. He's also been swinging a pretty good bat. Not so much for power, but he has been ripping singles. Just seems to be locked in and on the ball lately. I think you can also look at Starlin Castro, probably another guy. Hopefully they hit him up in like the 2-hole today, up towards the top of the order. Right-handed bat to attack left-handed pitching. Castro's hit left-handed pitching well most of his career. He's still pretty cheap, especially for a second base option, so I think he's another guy we can look at. Then Carlos Beltran is probably my favorite option. 341 WOBA, 231 ISO score, probably the best bat on the Yankees, or at least the most consistent against left-handed pitching, although he is 0 of 9 lifetime against Jorge De La Rosa, so I would say he's probably due for a hit here, but, you never know. Last game to talk about, the LA Dodgers against the Arizona Diamondbacks. This game is in Arizona. Kenta Maeda is on the mound for the Dodgers. Left-handed bats are only hitting 197 against them this year. Right-handers are hitting 224. So it's not like anybody's knocking this guy around. David Peralta has a 385 WOBA, 221 ISO score. So as far as left-handed bats go, he's probably the best one to attack him with. With him being a little bit of a better batting average to right-handed bats, I think Goldie's in play too. 399 WOBA, 236 ISO for him. I mean, Maeda's a pretty good pitcher. I don't expect him to get lit up. If you're going to do anything, maybe you take one of these guys hoping that they tag him for a home run as a one-off. And even then, it's probably only a tournament play. I don't think I'm going to have any Diamondbacks in cash. On the other side of this game, you got Archie Bradley on the mound, the young kid, right-handed pitcher. Left-handed bats have done a little bit better than him, although it's a very limited sample size. He only pitched a couple innings last year, pitched a couple innings this year already. I think Corey Seager, probably the most elite play in this game. 377 WOBA, 224 ISO for him against right-handed pitching. After that, there are a lot of lefties they're going to throw at him. You're going to get Adrian Gonzalez. You're going to get Jock Peterson. Probably going to get Yasmani Grandal. I think all of these guys are okay options. Definitely guys that I would want in a stack of Dodgers if I was stacking them up. But I don't think that any of them are absolutely elite plays, maybe outside of, Seager here today. And that wraps it up for the Benny's Bats section. Like I said, big 14-game slate on tap tonight. Make sure you, come back and keep an eye on it. Danielle will be updating us with some of the weather situations. Josh will be coming out with his pitching article on the bump in a little bit. We got some other articles from some of our contributors, kind of pointing out some bargain players that we can look at and, some lineup switches that Ricky does a very good job on. We are starting to shift some of our content over to NFL football because I know a lot of people are getting excited about that. FSTA conference is going on this week. We got some big news that DraftKings and FanDuel might be merging. Got some big news that the Senate and the House in New York State combined their bills. So hopefully we get a vote on that. And my fellow brothers across the river here in New York City get to start playing some daily fantasy again. So there's a lot going on in the industry and a lot going on tonight as well. Make sure you get over to rotocurve.com. This way you're in with everything going on and you know all the news that's going on and you got all the information you need to help build some winning lineups. So thank you guys for joining us here at RotoCurve. And as always, stay classy, DFS.